As the apex species on the planet, humans have the capacity to immensely shift the ecological balance on a global scale, both positively and negatively. The unfortunate reality, however, is that, if taken as a sum, the impact of the human race on nature is a net negative. Specifically, with regards to extinction, according to a 2015 study published in Science Advances by conservation biologist Gerardo Ceballos, current vertebrate extinction rates are up to 100 times higher than the natural background rate. In this discussion, I will separate the extinction of species into two categories: human driven and natural. I would argue that it is the obligation and responsibility of mankind to correct this mistake. Ecosystems are being thrown out of balance, and, as the cause of that imbalance, it is morally and logically the case that humans ought to correct the disruption. The discussion, however, becomes more difficult when discussing species that have gone extinct naturally, because bringing them back offers potential risk to both the environment and the formerly extinct species, increasing with the amount of time that has passed. For this situation, I would have to argue for a case-by-case basis on both whether or not to de-extinct a species and how said species should be treated. For example, if a species was extinct due to man relatively recently, say within 20 years, restoring and de-extincting the species would be the equivalent of restoring an ecosystem. It would be similar to the effects of cleaning and restoring a polluted area to its original state. In his article published in 2023, environmental philosophy professor Jay Odenbaugh states that a common argument for de-extinction comes from considerations of restorative justice. When a moral agent harms a moral subject, the former owes the latter restitution. If an animal went extinct due to humans, since humans now have the capabilities to resurrect a species, it is morally correct to resurrect said species. However, if a species has been extinct for millennia, it is difficult to gauge the positive or negative effects of the reintroduction of the species to an environment. In fact, it could even serve as an invasive species in some cases. Additionally, the de-extinction of animals does not only cause damage to the ecosystems they are introduced to, but to the animal itself as well. Because there are a vast number of variables, such as atmospheric composition, average temperatures, and new diseases that have changed, it is difficult to create a catch-all rule for de-extinction, which is why it is imperative to evaluate each species individually. Finally, when looking at the current state of biodiversity, we should aim towards protecting current endangered species. According to the IUCN's Red List, there are currently more than 48,600 species that are threatened with extinction. As much as bringing back an extinct species is a great accomplishment, the reintroduction of these species to nature may put endangered species into a more precarious situation in which they find themselves. As stated earlier, if a de-extinct species acts as an invasive species, it would put pressure on the current endangered species. Therefore, because there are both potential positive and negative effects of de-extinction, we should go on a case-by-case basis of handling de-extinction. Scientists have the responsibility to further research on what potential effects a species may have on current ecosystems, as well as rigorous testing and simulations to see if their theories hold true. Meanwhile, governments have the responsibility of critically analyzing scientists' research and creating policies of protection based on the findings.